A record settlement for Toyota. The automaker will pay more than $1 billion to resolve a criminal safety investigation, and it includes an admission by the company that it misled consumers about issues that cause cars to suddenly accelerate. Phil LeBeau has the details and why this agreement may work as a roadmap for General Motors' current problems.
Today, the Justice Department wrapped up its case looking into how Toyota handled the recall of millions of vehicles suspected of unintended acceleration. And the outcome was not a pretty one for the Japanese automaker. Toyota will pay a fine of $1.2 billion, be on probation for 3 years. It will also agree to have an independent monitor look at how it implements safety protocols in the future. In exchange for meeting those terms, Toyota will avoid further prosecution. Again, this all revolves around how Toyota handled the recall of 10 million vehicles suspected of unintended acceleration. The U.S. Attorney says before Toyota issued any recalls, it repeatedly lied about the problem.
And in that moment, in a misguided and ill-advised effort at crisis management, Toyota made the fateful decision to mislead the public to protect its brand. Rather than come clean, the company covered up and misled again and again and again.
The Toyota case raises questions about how GM is handling the recall of 1.6 million vehicles with faulty ignition switches. GM has hired a former U.S. attorney to investigate what went wrong. And today, the Attorney General said he would not comment on a potential investigation of GM.
I think this is a sign for the industry that we take these matters seriously. Individuals, corporations will be held accountable, and I think the great work that's been done by this team can be replicated if that's necessary.
So far, GM CEO Mary Barra says she has not been contacted by the U.S. Attorney's Office, but if she is, she says she will cooperate. Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Chicago.
Carl Brower says the timing of the Toyota settlement is interesting. He's senior analyst at Kelley Blue Book. Mr. Brower, welcome. Good to have you with us. Why do you think it's interesting? Do you think it's not a coincidence?
I don't think it's a coincidence. I think the government wanted to resolve this issue as soon as they could once they saw that there was this next one coming down the line. They've only got so many resources to dedicate to these kind of things. And I also think they wanted to send a message very clearly at the start of the GM process so that they get full cooperation.
Does this give you any hint as to what kinds of penalties General Motors may face or what they may have to do?
It's going to be interesting because there are some similarities, but there's some differences too. Similarly, to Toyota, the GM issue took a while to resolve, longer than it should have taken to resolve by many accounts, given how early the first signs of this issue were. But conversely, the number of related fatalities and injuries is much lower, and the number of cars involved in the recall is much lower, and even the nature of it, unintended acceleration, I think just has a more frightening, troubling sense to it. It's still bad that these cars were stalling and the engine was shutting off because it made it harder to control the vehicles, but there's no nebulous kind of blur as to what the problem is. There was a long time it wasn't,
right. People
didn't know for sure what was causing the Toyota problem. We know what caused the GM problem.
Out of control acceleration certainly puts the chill into anybody's mind who is a driver. Thinking back to when Toyota went through this, 2009 into 2010, that company has come back very nicely and seems to have suffered relatively little reputational damage. Do you expect GM will have the same experience?
I think so. I think, Toyota had record profits this last fiscal year that they've reported, and they've certainly recovered. But it took some effort and it took some careful and focused management on their part for years. I think General Motors, their current management and their current product lineup, the company's the strongest it's been, I would argue, in probably 20 to 30 years at least. So they're dealing with an issue that came from the old GM era. They're dealing with cars that aren't made anymore. So I think this should have a smaller impact overall than Toyota, and it should be an easier recovery for GM, particularly because the company seems to, from day one of this new era, which really just started in January, they seem much more cooperative and ready to move forward and be very forward and transparent with the government.
Quick thought, how do you grade Mary Barra so far in her handling of this?
I grade her at least an A, I would say. She is being very transparent, very forthcoming. She's already acknowledged that she's going to work with Congress and help and give them whatever they need. She's appointed a high-level individual to be focused on all global safety issues and report directly to her. So she's being very proactive.
Carl, thank you very much.
Great
Carl
being here.
Brauer is senior analyst with Kelley Blue Book.